Some stories are small. Some stories are big. But this one changed the world. It started in a little garage, and now it's in your hand. This is not just a story about phones or computers. This is a story about ideas. A story about trying, failing, and trying again. The company is Apple. You know the logo. You see it on your phone, your watch, maybe even your headphones. But do you know how it started? Two young men, one big dream. No money, no office, just a big idea. This story is real. It is about hard work. It is about friendship and fights. And yes, it is about thinking different. If you ever had a dream, if you ever felt lost but still wanted to build something, this story will speak to you. So stay with me. We will learn how Apple was born, how it grew, and how it changed the world. If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to my channel and click like to support me. Let's begin. The year was 1975. There were no smartphones, no laptops, and no computers at home. Computers were big and very expensive. Only big companies or schools had them. Most people had never seen one. But in California, a young man lived with his parents. His name was Steve Jobs. He was 20 years old. Steve was different. He didn't like school rules, so he left college after one semester. But his mind was full of ideas. As a child, he liked to take things apart, radios, toys, anything. He always wanted to know, how does this work? He loved art, music, and technology. And he liked to ask big questions. Steve had a friend from school. His name was Steve Wozniak. People called him Woz. Woz was quiet and kind. He was very smart. He loved computers. One day, Woz made a small computer at home. It had no screen, no keyboard, and no case. Just wires and a board. But guess what? It worked. He showed it to Steve. Steve looked at it and smiled. "This is great. We can sell it," he said. Woz was not sure. He liked to build, not sell. But Steve had a big dream. "Let's start a company," he said. They had no money, so Steve sold his old van. Woz sold his calculator. Now they had a little money, just enough to begin. They had no office, so they worked in a garage behind Steve's house. It was hot in the summer and cold in the winter. There were boxes everywhere. Sometimes they worked on the floor. Sometimes they sat on milk crates. But they didn't care. They were building something new. At night, the neighbors saw the lights. They asked, "What are those boys doing in there?" The boys were working hard. Day and night they built computers by hand. In 1976, they finished their first product. It was called the Apple I. The Apple I was simple. Just a board, no screen, no case. But it worked. It was their first step. Now they needed a name. Steve liked fruits. He said, "Let's call it Apple." Woz said, "Okay." It was short, simple, and easy to remember. They took their computers to a local store. The store liked them and bought some. Steve and Woz smiled like kids. They were so happy. More people heard the name Apple. And just like that, a small company was born in a small garage. And that company was ready to grow. But Steve Jobs didn't want to stop. He said, "We can do more. We can make a better computer, a computer for everyone." Wozniak smiled and said, "Let's try." He sat down and started working again. This time, he made something new. It had colors. It had a nice case. It looked clean and modern, not scary. They called it the Apple II. Now they needed money. They couldn't build many computers alone. Then they met a man named Mike Markkula. He was not a tech guy. He was a businessman. But when he saw the small computer, he smiled. He didn't laugh. He said, "I think this can change something." He gave them money and support. With Mike's help, Apple became a real company. They moved out of the garage and into an office. The office was small, but it felt big to them. Now they had desks and coffee. They even had a little sign on the door. It was their next step. They started building many Apple II computers. They worked hard. They were fast and full of hope. In 1977, they went to a big computer show. Can you imagine it? Lots of people, big lights, new machines. Steve wore his best shirt. Woz carried the computer. They were nervous, but ready. People walked by and looked. They touched the computer. They smiled. One family said, "Wow, this is easy." When people opened the Apple II box, they were surprised. It looked friendly, not scary like other computers. It felt like something you could use at home. And people did. Families used it at home. Schools used it for students. Small businesses used it for work. The Apple II was a big success. They sold thousands of them. Apple started to grow fast, very fast. And Steve Jobs? He looked around, smiled, and said, "This is just the beginning." The Apple II was a big success. And after that, everything changed. Apple became a big company. They had more workers. They had big offices. And yes, they had money. Steve Jobs became famous. His face was on magazines. People called him a young genius. You could say he was like a rock star in the tech world. But inside the company, things were not so perfect. Steve had big dreams. He wanted to make the next great computer, and he wanted it to be perfect. He started a new project. The name of the computer was the Macintosh. The team worked day and night. Steve was full of energy. He pushed people. He asked for many changes. He said, "It must be beautiful, it must be fast, and it must be simple." That sounds great, right? But not everyone liked Steve's style. Some workers were tired. Some managers were angry. They said, "Steve is too difficult. He wants too much." Still, the team continued. In 1984, the Macintosh was ready. Apple made a big commercial for it. And guess what? It played during the Super Bowl, a big football game in the U.S. The ad was loud, bold, and very different. It said, "1984 will not be like 1984. People were surprised. They talked about it. It was new. It was exciting. The Macintosh was cool. It had a mouse. That was new. It had icons on the screen, not just words. You could click and move things. It was fun. But after some time, there was a problem. The Macintosh was expensive. Other computers were cheaper. People started buying other brands. The bosses at Apple were not happy. The company had money, but sales were going down. They had to make a choice. In 1985, they called Steve. They said, "We want you to leave Apple." Yes, his own company, the one he started in a garage. Now they asked him to go. Steve Jobs was only 30 years old. He walked out of Apple. He was sad. He was angry. He didn't know what was next. But this is not the end. No, this is just a new chapter. Steve Jobs left Apple in 1985. It was a hard moment. He was sad. But he did not stop. He was still full of ideas. So he started a new company. It was called Next. At Next, he made computers for schools and students. The company was small, but the ideas were big. And guess what? Steve also helped a movie company. The name was Pixar. Yes, the same Pixar that made Toy Story. Steve gave them money and ideas. With his help, they made the first 3D cartoon movie in the world. It was called Toy Story, and it was a big success. Later, they made more movies, Finding Nemo, Cars, and many others. While Steve was doing well, Apple was not. In the 1990s, Apple had problems. Big problems. They made many computers, but people didn't like them. They were slow and expensive. Other companies were faster and cheaper. Apple was losing money. Some people said, Apple will die. But then, in 1997, something amazing happened. Apple bought Steve's company, Next, and that's how Steve came back. At first, he was only helping. But very soon, he became the boss again. He made big changes. He stopped many projects. He said, let's make simple and beautiful products. In 1998, Apple made the iMac. It was colorful, it looked fun, and it was easy to use. People smiled when they saw it. Apple started to grow again. Then, in 2001, something new arrived. The iPod. Before that, people used CDs and tapes. But now, you could carry 1,000 songs in your pocket. It felt like magic. And then came the big one. In 2007, Steve showed the iPhone. It was not just a phone. It was a camera. It was a music player. It was a small computer in your hand. There were no buttons, only a screen. You touched it to open apps. People had never seen anything like it, and just like that, the world changed. After that, Apple made more great things. In 2010, they made the iPad. It was not a phone. It was not a computer. It was something in between. People used it at home, at school, and at work. Apple also opened the App Store. Now people could download apps, games, tools, lessons. Phones were not just for calling anymore. They became part of life. Steve Jobs also became famous for his talks. He wore a black shirt, jeans, and sneakers. He walked on stage and spoke with heart. People listened to every word. Before he died, he gave a speech to students. He said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." And many people never forgot that line. In 2011, Steve Jobs died. He was only 56 years old. People around the world cried. They put Apple stickers on their windows, cars, and phones. Not for the company, but for Steve. Apple was different. Other companies made many models. Apple made just a few, but they were special. People didn't just like the products. They loved the story behind them. They loved how Apple made them feel. And today, Apple is one of the biggest companies in the world. But don't forget, it all started with two friends. One garage and one dream. But the story did not end. No, the dream continued. After Steve, a man named Tim Cook became the new leader. He worked with Steve for many years. He was quiet, but he was strong. And like Steve, he believed in big ideas. Under Tim Cook, Apple made new things. Maybe you use them now. In 2015, Apple made the Apple Watch. It was more than a watch. It showed the time, but also your heart rate and steps. You could read messages and listen to music from your wrist. Crazy, right? Apple also made better iPhones, iPads, and MacBooks. Then came the AirPods, small white earphones with no wires. Maybe you have them in your bag now. And do you know the M1 chip? It's like a brain for Apple computers. It's fast, smart, and made by Apple. But Apple didn't only care about tech. They started to help people, schools, and the earth. They said, "We want clean energy. So now many Apple buildings use energy from the sun and wind. They also help schools by giving iPads and tools for learning. And in 2023, Apple did something new again. They showed the Apple Vision Pro. It's a headset. You put it on your face, and you see apps in the air. You can watch videos like you are inside them. It looks like the future, and it's real. Today, Apple is one of the biggest companies in the world, but the idea is still simple. Make things that are easy, beautiful, and useful. And do you remember where it all started? Yes, a small garage. 2 young men, no office, no money, only a dream. So now let me ask you, do you have a dream too? Maybe your story will start in a notebook, maybe in a bedroom, or maybe in your mind. Big things can start small, and one day the world might know your story too.